Hello and welcome back to Bite Size Boxing. Today we're going to be talking about the news of Jared Anderson signing with Frank Warren's Queensbury Promotions. Is it a good move? Is it a bad move? So this is a move that we've heard a fair bit about over the last couple of weeks. He signed a co-promotional deal with Top Rank and Queensbury. So you would imagine that Jared Anderson is going to be basing himself over in the UK. There is a rumour he's going to be fighting on a card in May. And the rumour is that it's going to be Solomon Dakers. Now, for those of you who might be from the US, you might not be familiar with Solomon Dakers. You might not know who this guy is. He's kind of a British level, kind of fringe British level fighter here in the UK. A well-schooled amateur. The best way I can describe him is he's a real sort of 6 or 7 out of 10 in every department. No special effects, very straight up and down, just a pretty basic sort of boxer. He's not bad, he's not good, he's not, he's not fast, he's not slow. As I say, he's he's quite a well-rounded boxer, to be fair, Dakers. But you would expect, this is a first fight for Anderson. This is someone who's being, set up as cannon fodder for Anderson, let's be honest. And if Anderson has really anything, then he should really be going through someone like Solomon Dakers, because Dakers, as we've seen him get blown out in, I think it was a round by David Adlai, so we know this is a guy who, if you stick it to him, you can get rid of him, and I would expect Jared Anderson to do that. So it's a decent sort of first, test, sort of dipping his toe in the water in the UK, and I think there's two ways you can look at this. For starters, you can say this is a very good move, because obviously Queensbury is the home of the heavyweights, right? So if you're a heavyweight, where else to be but Queensbury? That's where everyone is, other than Usyk. So we're like that and Joshua, but, and potentially Fury, actually. Fury could end up on Zuffa, but we don't know yet. But really and truly, Usyk has 1 foot out the door, Joshua has 1 foot out the door, and so does Tyson Fury. So really and truly, all of the guys we're thinking of, your Zangs, your Kabayels, your Moses Ataumas, your Daniel Dubois, your Fabio Wardleys, etc., they're all with Queensbury. So it's the place to be. So from that perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense. And sort of coming over and maybe basing yourself over and having fights in the UK, again, that makes sense, because with all due respect, for the last 10 years or so, the home of the heavyweights has been in the UK. It hasn't been in the US. Boxing has been quite a niche sport over in the United States for many years now. You have had some outliers that can attract interest over the last few years, the likes of, say, Gervonta Davis, or I don't know, maybe Ryan Garcia, someone like that. But generally speaking, boxing is quite a niche sport at this point. So going over and basing yourself where it's at, in terms of, from a geographical point of view over in the UK, that's not a bad idea. So from that perspective, I think it's good, and it does show that Anderson is taking his career seriously to some extent, because there had been questions over that sort of in the past. So I think that's good. The only problem is, well, there's two things. You obviously have the Turkey Al Sheikh, the ring fallout, and the lawsuit and everything happening there, which could mean that in the future, if any of those big Saudi cards come back, etc., will Frank Warren be frozen out? Probably. But then you'll look at it and go, well, he's got a big enough stable to cope. I've got, even Lawrence Okoli's fighting on Queensbury cards these days. So, there's a lot of heavyweights, right, buzzing around. But then that in lieu causes another problem, and that is congestion. How many times has Frank Warren managed to get Jimmy Zhang out? Exactly. There's a problem there. He's got too many heavyweights almost. So it's almost at a point where there's so much talent, he's got the division so on lock that he's struggling to get all these guys dates and to get them out. And as a result, you're seeing a lot of inactivity by Queensbury fighters. I mean, I think of Moses Atauma, a guy who's in the point of his career where really and truly you need to be getting him out every 2 or 3 months if you can. Joshua at the same stage was being got out quite frequently. Even if it was against Binman, you'd get him out, right? But someone like Moses Atauma, I know he's had injuries, but still he's been being got out every, 5 or 6 months, which just isn't enough for a prospect. And so that is a concern, is that will they be able to get Anderson out enough to get him rounds, to get, the rounds in and to develop him and to rebuild him after that Bacoli loss? I don't know. So that is the only thing, is that you do look at that from a holistic point of view and you go, it's good he's joining where it's at, he's good he's basing himself in the UK where it's at, but it's bad because, again, there's a lot of congestion. Are they going to be able to get the fights, etc., etc.? So that does remain to be seen. But on the whole, I think it's an interesting move. And I still think the jury's out as far as Jared Anderson is concerned. There have been pretty big red flags as far as I'm concerned, mainly down to his sort of mental makeup, if I'm honest. I remember at my old job, I used to work night shifts, right? And so this was a fight I'd never ordinarily watch, but they had the Anderson versus oh god, what's his name? I've just drawn a blank. The guy who Anthony Joshua fought in his to get the world title, Charles Martin, right? The Martin fight, right? And I happened to stay up to watch it. I would never have normally done that, but I was on a night shift. I thought, oh, I'll stick it on. And I saw him go life and death at points with Martin, in as well as getting really badly buzzed at the end of that fight. And it panned to him in the changing room after the fight, and you guys are all going to know what I'm going to say. And he was there in his mum's arms, literally sobbing, like, uncontrollably. Now, look, it was a hard fight, I get that, but he went into deep waters and he got through it. And I understand, different people have different mental makeups, but, you didn't see Usyk on the way up doing those kind of things. You didn't see Tyson Fury on the way up doing those kind of things. You didn't see Anthony Joshua on the way up doing those kind of things. Lennox Lewis, when you think of great, truly great fighters, and I'm not saying necessarily that Anthony Joshua, for example, is a truly great fighter, but, world level, elite, world level to elite fighters, those kind of bracket of fighters, you don't see that kind of vulnerability, if I'm honest, from a mental point of view. And when you combine that with the fact that for the longest time Anderson's been saying, he's got one foot out the door already, he wants to be retired by, his mid to late 20s, he's not hanging around, he's not in this game, he just does it because he's good at it, he doesn't really love it, these aren't things you really want to hear. So, for me, I think from a technical point of view, there is a lot to like about Jared Anderson. I think he's very athletic. I think he's got, good speed, good athleticism, good movement, good punching power. I do think that the chin is a question after that Bakoli fight. Yes, Bakoli punches hard, but every time Bakoli landed clean, Anderson didn't like it. So I do think the chin is a possible worry. The heart, I suppose. I say that, but in fairness, every time he got put down, every time he was hurt in that Bakoli fight, he did come roaring back. So maybe the heart isn't so much of a question, but I do think the possible mental fragilities is something that could be a problem in the future. I don't know. It remains to be seen. He's recently become a father, so maybe that will maybe help him mature a little bit as a man, and we'll see where that takes him. So, as I say, the jury's still out. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh no, he stands no chance, he's no good. But in the same breath, I'm also not going to say he's the heir apparent, because I'd be lying if I thought that, So, as I say, we'll see how this goes, how this link up with Queensbury sort of pans out. And yeah, I'd be interested to know what you guys think, because as I say, I do think there is potential with Jared Anderson. I think he has, potential to be quite a good fighter. There are good attributes there to work on, but it's about sharpening those attributes and hopefully being able to strengthen him up mentally enough to sort of compete at the upper tier of the division. But you let me know what you think. I'd be interested to know. And yeah, take it easy, guys. Cheers.